Good morning. So, in my last flight simulator video, I made a pretty bold claim, I think, that I should put some context behind for the casual gamer who may not be familiar with how flight works in Grand Theft Auto because it's not a game that appeals to everyone specifically. And my claim was that overall, I find flight in Grand Theft Auto a better, more realistic experience than I do in Flight Simulator. That's a loaded statement. So let me put some context there before I jump in. In Grand Theft Auto, you're not going to be picking up a plane and flipping switches in the cockpit, contacting ATC, doing anything like that. And that is a huge portion of the sim experience, and I love that aspect to it. It is a lot of fun. If you look at my early videos, I enjoyed going to a parking space, powering on the plane, taxiing away, going down the taxiway, taking off, landing, all that good stuff, and then turning my plane back off. That was a good part of the overall experience. I enjoyed having to do all of that because I wanted to play a sim. But I also wanted to fly. It's a flight simulator, and flight is a major portion of that, which, as all of my recent videos have said, is extremely lacking. And that comparison video, I hope, highlighted more so how lacking a lot of it actually is because of the disparity between the way the airplanes fly. And that's what's so critical in there, because air is air. Yes, the density of air can change to a degree depending on heat, barometric pressure. There's so many different things that can influence the overall pressure and density of the air itself. But at its core, in the flights I was doing, the weather was the same. The wind was supposed to be the same, i.e. non-existent. The city was the same. The time of day was roughly the same. And yet all those planes handled slightly differently. A couple of the lower prop ones handled very similarly, but other prop planes and jets, they felt like I was playing a completely different game. And that's what I'm talking about in the flight experience. So here, I'm going to jump in a helicopter and head over to my hangar to grab some airplanes. We're not talking about weaponry or anything like that. Get rid of the annoying thing. Now, this is an arcade game, but you can see the way the helicopter bobs and moves a little bit as if it's being hit by wind. It's more a simulated situation, but there's drift, there's things like that. I have good, full working rudder control in this case to tweak the rear rotor. Now again, this being an arcade and me being an old school gamer, I play these types of games with keyboard and mouse, so I usually fly in this type of a situation with my keyboard and mouse. A lot of people look at me like I'm nuts for that, but I've been doing it for 26, 28 years now. I don't even know. And I'm used to it. I can make it work. I can fly better this way than some people can in a game like this with an Xbox controller. Whereas in Flight Simulator, the Xbox controller is extremely comfortable and I love it. If I'm going for a full sim experience, sure, by all means, I would want to have a HOTAS or a nice flight stick or something to make it a better experience. But for what I'm doing here, I'm having fun tooling around the city, going over the cranes. And because of the way the game operates, you can see I can easily adjust. Ooh, that got crashed. The way the helicopter is maneuvering, I can slow down, speed up, I can come down here, land, and all of that. I am primarily highlighting just the way flight works. Now, the air is clear and nice right now. If there's a storm out, you do actually kind of get bounced around a little bit more. But let's go into the hangar and look at a couple of the planes. I'm not going to fly everything because, again, we're comparing games that aren't really the same, but I just wanted to put some context behind my statements. So let me get inside my hangar. I don't know why you'd fly a helicopter in the hangar like this, but hey, why not? It's a game. Alright, so in here I have a smattering of aircraft. Obviously my attack helicopter is my favorite. I have an old MiG, P-41 essentially, an old watercraft, an A-10, and I have a nice little fun ultralight. I do have another prop plane, but I have it in storage because it's crap. So, going with the props, I don't have a handy instance of the Dodo, which is their version of the Cessna 172 or 162 or 152. I don't remember which version, but they have a Cessna in the game. The only one I have is the pontoon one, but it's not available in my hangar, so I'm not really going to be using that. Alright, so here's the plane. You can see I've got a rudder that maneuvers nice and slowly. It also changes how I drive. The gear's down, so it puts some flaps down for me. I have nice elevator controls. You can see they don't just move 100% fast. There's some movement to them, and that's for the most part because that surface isn't really directing the air. Again, this is an arcade game, and that's why I can speed up super fast very quickly. My tail's already off the ground, and if I turn too sharply, the plane barrels over. But that's not what we're here for. So let me get this thing up on the runway here. Alright, we're close enough. Let's just take off. Alright, so we're airborne. And you can see I'm limited by my speed. The plane's lifting off quite easily and pitching forward, kind of like the others do because the flaps are down. I'm going to raise the gear, the flaps go up. You can see my speed goes up and the plane starts tracking a lot better. Now I can turn pretty sharply. This is full pull up. You can see the maneuverability of the plane. It tracks and maneuvers and goes around the world much more like a real plane does than some of those did in Flight Simulator, like the Extra. This is a very maneuverable warplane. It's not going to be quite as snappy as the Extra, and you can see it moves faster than the Extra did at full tilt, and I can balance it out very well. I likewise have a functioning rudder. It may not work 100% accurately or true to the world, but I can actually use the rudder to steer the airplane, and if I'm turning to the side, I can pop that rudder out and actually turn the plane in a more realistic manner than I currently can in Flight Simulator. If the arcade game can figure out how to do it better than you can, I think that's a bit of a problem. The canyon running in these planes is just fun. You can come down here to the ground, and that's kind of what I did in that Grand Canyon video in the what was that plane? The Cub Carbon, I think it was, yeah. And you can have an absolute blast cruising around the world in these planes. And if you want to land on a beach, you can set up to do so. There's a bit of a dry area there, so we can turn around. It's an arcade game. And I'm not looking at the realistic aspect to it. I'm looking at the way that the aircraft control and maneuver through the air. Let's see if these guys move. They don't. Alright, so let me throttle up. Now if you remember, in Flight Simulator, as soon as I touch water in a plane that's not made for water, I die. I just dipped my wheel in the water. I can actually drive my plane into the water. Something as simple as that is handled much better in an arcade-style game. There's more realism in this than a lot of aspects of Flight Simulator, which is just very odd. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have things operate like that. And if you look at the way the plane maneuvers and handles, it's the same basic handling as the attack helicopter. There's no real appreciable difference between those two aircraft. It's predictable. They handle and they fly the same way. Again, air is air, essentially. I know I'm really shortchanging a lot of the science behind it, but the ultimate statement is accurate in the way these things should overall handle. Aerodynamics, speed, yes, I get it. They will have different types of lift. The ailerons will impact differently. But in straight hand flight without any turning, you saw how those planes were handling and going absolutely nuts. Alright, I'm not going to bother with the runway. I'm in fastest jet the game has to offer. Alright, so you can see I'm in the jet. It's not quite as maneuverable as the other plane. It's made for more speed. This is the fastest jet the game has to offer, not by much. You can see I'm getting hit by some of that pseudo wind again. All I'm doing is holding the throttle. I'm doing nothing on the control surfaces. Till there. But I can predictably understand what my plane is going to be doing and have a lot of fun canyon blasting, flying down the roads, just enjoying it. And if I don't feel like blasting around the lower parts, I can climb pretty high up, even way above the clouds, fly to other airports, maneuver, land. There's lots of things that I can do that make this, especially for the casual player, even potentially for some of the non-casual players, a better flight experience, which is why I am so disappointed in the devs for Flight Simulator 2020, because it just doesn't make sense that we don't have proper controls, that air isn't air. The planes all move through the air in such vastly different ways. Like, one is missing a door, so the plane's being buffeted oddly by heavy turbulence, and other planes just fly like absolute beautiful butter. That is what I meant by my statement that I found Grand Theft Auto a more compelling, realistic, and stable flight experience, because the planes all fly within the same bound rules. They handle differently, they have different weight, mass, effects of ailerons and aerodynamics. They do get impacted by set variables. And while Flight Simulator does the same thing to an extent, the variables don't seem to be operating within the same realm of rules. That's why I think the Citation and the CJ4 and the Longitude behave so drastically different, because they're not bound by the same rules that the propeller planes are. And if that's the case, then it's really shocking. Every plane should be flying with their mass and all those thrust rules bound to the same environment, not a different one. I don't even think the flight simulators from the 80s functioned in that poor of a manner. So, hope that explains my position quickly. I didn't want to make this flight sim video about Grand Theft Auto. I'm not saying Grand Theft Auto is a more fun flying experience than Flight Simulator. They're completely different games. They are not comparable in a realistic fashion. But what I was trying to show, and why I made that statement, was that in this game, the planes, all air vehicles in general, even you if you go skydiving, you behave in the air the same way, by the same rules, by the same guidelines. Whereas in Flight Simulator, it does not seem that each plane follows the same rules and has the same environmental bindings to the way they handle. So, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.